Good morning, traders. Thanks for joining me this morning. It is 8:03 a.m. Chicago time on Monday, the 6th of October, 2025. I want to remind you that derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. This is episode number 2695. I'm not going to display the convergent trading pre-market summary sheet this morning. I'm having a little bit of a display issue, but because I am traveling, I'm remote. Um, Overall, this morning the risk posture is mild risk on, mild risk on. The only earnings in line today are Constellation Brands after the close. Some news out of Japan today. This Japanese stock market catapulted higher as a surprise win after Japan's ruling. LDP elected pro-stimulus Sanae Takaishi as its leader, who's set to become Japan's first female prime minister. This is a pro-stimulus politician, and so the equity market in Japan just shot up. We're not seeing much of a reaction in the JGBs, treasuries overall. They're just off just a little bit, but the idea is that they're likely to stimulate, and stimulating, of course, causes a devaluation. So the Japanese yen against the US dollar down 1.52% this morning. 1.52%. The dollar stronger this morning by 55 basis points. The U.S. according to the U.S. dollar index. That's a pretty key area. The other piece was the French Prime Minister Locarno has resigned, presented his resignation to President Macron. I think he was in that position for just a month. So the CAC 40 this morning is getting whacked. CAC 40 is the French um, stock index. That's getting whacked. So kind of seeing the opposite reaction. Was down about 2% earlier today. Goldman Sachs warns that rising volatility in Japan's long-dated government bonds following Takayashi's election win could spill over to global markets. The other big piece is this government shutdown. The government's been shut down for a little bit less than a week. The market's taking it in stride. We've seen this many, many times. This is kind of a um, political roulette game. However, we did not get the non-farm payrolls on Friday. If we don't get PPI and CPI, um, the market's going to start to see this as risk. And as you may know, when the market perceives risk, it runs for it runs for protection, and so risk-off sentiment starts to prevail in those situations. So keep an eye out. There has been zero progress on the negotiation for reopening the federal government. People aren't getting their paychecks and so on and so forth. OPEC Plus will raise oil output by 137,000 barrels per day from November, lower than the anticipated 500,000. This is pushing crude or push crude a little bit higher. It has since come off. Israel and Hamas are set to begin mediation talks in Egypt on Monday following Hamas's agreement in principle to release all hostages under U.S. President Trump's Gaza plan. AMD signs an AI chip supply deal with OpenAI and gives it an option to take a 10% stake. This is a battle with NVIDIA looking to take some dominance from NVIDIA there. OpenAI Dev Day 2025 is today. Sam Altman's keynote speech is at 1 p.m. Eastern. Looking at today's numbers, ECB's employment trends index at 10, ECB's Lagarde at 1, Governor Bailey, BOE Governor Bailey at 1:30, Fed Schmidt speech at 5. And then we get the Japanese household spending at 7:30 Eastern, and Australia's Westpac consumer confidence at 8:30. Uh, Also, since it is Monday, I generally look to the week, and the calendar is very, very thin. this week in terms of high tier releases. So tomorrow, Tuesday, we get the Canadian IV PMI at 10. Wednesday, we get the FOMC minutes. We could see a little bit of movement there. Balance of trade out of Germany on Thursday at 2 a.m. Eastern. And then Friday, we get the unemployment rate and Michigan sentiment. Unemployment rate out of Canada and Michigan sentiment prelim. This is the mover at 10. Other than that, the calendar's quite light. How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing today? I'm not sharing a screen because the pre-market summary sheet display wasn't working. I want to start out actually with this. I want to show you. Hang on. Let's do this. I'm not sure which one of these screens this is. Okay, there, and this. This is, you know, straight out of YouTube. This is Friday's expectation, and you could see on Friday we were opening, you know, in the 67.71-ish, 67.70 area when the TraderBite was done, and what I had expected is an open auction that would likely dip down into the 67.50 on Friday as a primary scenario. If we don't see an early dip, remember we were opening in range. We were looking for the prior settle stat. It had already tested overnight with a double TPO high and what had come off. And to me, it looked like it's very, very likely to test the last spike low, which starts just below 67.50. So that was the primary scenario on Friday if you were here. The secondary scenario, if that didn't happen and we see a turn up, was a push to where it shows here 6,800 up here. And what we got on Friday was both. It just lately it's kind of been like that. We ended up going to the 6,800, pushing that. Pretty strong open on Friday. You could see the open and the low together. The open and the low together. And it ended up pulling all the way back to the open and then starting back up again. We pushed to 6,800 even on the nose, and then we turn around and went to 67.54. Didn't quite get to 67.50, but it did find sellers up there against the 6,800 on the first shot, and then we pushed right back into the DGPs with a higher low into the close, with settlement actually not moving that much between Friday and Thursday, 67.64. The point of control shifted up. The auction is still one time framing up, meaning the trend, the market imbalance, is defending the lows by not allowing them to be taken back or breached. And so overall, the trend is still strong to the upside. This morning, we're opening in range. Friday had kind of a multi-distribution profile. We broke both the IB high and the IB low, and we finished in the lower quartile of the range, making Friday another neutral extreme day low. Neutral extreme low, meaning it broke both the IB high and low to get neutral, and then it finished on one of the extremes. This here is to the low side. This morning, last night we gapped up, and what we have in the overnight session is a very balanced profile. We have DGPs on top of the overnight point of control and price right in that area. We're opening in balance this morning, so the idea here with it opening in balance is that we back off of any aggressive push. We're not expecting an aggressive push. Now, I told you that last week. I told you that, that was the anticipation for Wednesday. Remember, it was October 1st, and we ended up ripping up on Wednesday. But again, we find ourselves in the middle of the range in a in basically an overnight session that's pretty balanced. Pretty good taper on the top, although we do have a double top here. You can see the two TPOs at the high. So my bet is it's likely to chop around early and then go and take out these highs at some point. You know, it didn't do very well holding below the VWAP this morning. Like the VWAP's right here, this dashed cyan line, and you could see a spike down on the retest. So to me, you know, it's looking like it's likely to be a choppy open that eventually pushes towards that 6,800. That's the primary scenario for today on the ES. The secondary is that we do make an attempt at those double TPO highs. We may breach and do a liquidity check up here and then fall through. If it falls through the open and through the full session figures, then it becomes the trade becomes about stalking a short for the prior settle stat, which is around 76, 74, 76% historically. And so that's the secondary scenario. It's the better scenario for day trading because that move is likely to be a little bit more aggressive. But overall, you know, the volume in the overnight session is 154,000 contracts. The inventory is 100% long. The range is 27 points. And so overall, I'm seeing that, yeah, it's been pretty active, relatively active overnight, but we've exhausted tests to the upside and to the downside. We're opening right against the overnight point of control. So we are really intraday in balance, probably waiting for the next piece of news. So that's the ES. The ES, again, what are we looking for today? We're looking for an open auction that is likely to test, an open auction that is likely to test and then push that double top in the overnight session, consolidate, and then finally breach the 6,800 before coming back through. This will be a sort of a lick check above 6,800. The secondary scenario is an open that attempts higher, but if it does cross the mid, the opening print in the mid, then I'm looking for a pullback to lean against, something like this, a weak pullback to get short, looking for a push into prior settle at 67, 64. I'm really not expecting it to push too much farther. We may see our 54 again. I'm not really sure, but right now there's not much of a catalyst here in this market. Everything that the market might use to make a move is known. That's the thing. It's known. It's priced in. Some surprises out of Japan and France overnight, but overall, our markets are not really responding to that. So that's the S&P. Let's clear crude. Crude's an interesting one. Crude, if you recall on Friday, if you watch this, you know, we were looking for the 60 for some sort of a continuation on the pullback. So we had a pullback. We had a weak high on Friday, double TPO high, and it fell off. And it opened in a consolidation, and it ended up pushing up and kind of being very noisy on Friday. It was a pretty noisy trade. You could see the 30-minute bars overlapping each other all through here, and it finally let go to the downside. The expectation on this type of close on Friday, having settled just a little bit higher than it did Thursday, the expectation is it's likely to drift down and finally breach the prior low at 60.40 and make its way to 60 even before bouncing back up. But what it did is it gapped up. We had an internal gap in crude overnight on the fact, as I indicated, that OPEC plus, the increase in production is much more modest than what the market had heard before. It's not 500,000 barrels per day, 137,000 barrels per day, so lesser supply, and so price, with demand being equal, price will naturally move up. And what we did is we got trapped in this zone that we've had here for quite some time. This zone's been carried for a long time between 6160 and 6185, 6185 or so. And it's kind of trapped in here. So crude is opening a little bit lower than where it was in the overnight session. We're having an open auction in crude out of range of Friday's range. We've already breached the double TPO high. As expected, statistically speaking, the double TPO is not likely to last. And to me, I see a pretty decent taper on I see a pretty decent taper on the high overnight in crude and this drop. So this morning, if crude starts to fall and it tested the prior bar low at 61.25, if it starts to work itself down into this excess low, then it's very likely to breach the overnight low for the overnight stat and then starts to work itself down to 60.88. Crude overall fundamentally has a bit of news, but technically speaking, we remain below the balance zone, the big balance zone from 61.60 up, and it's very likely it's very likely to continue to advertise lower prices to bring in more stable buyers versus news buyers. So that's crude for you. Nasdaq, a bit of the the same as the S&P, except the Nasdaq is pretty aggressive in the overnight session. In fact, I want to show you the delta in the S&P. We're above the VWAP, and we're holding a relatively positive delta, not crazy. 2,900 plus for the overnight session. For the full session isn't that crazy. But the Nasdaq has a pretty strong delta with pretty good separation between current prices and the full session VWAP. So the Nasdaq's really taking the news from AMD much more favorably than the S&P. You could see the change in price is 0.82% versus 0.31%. So the Nasdaq's leading a little bit today. This is another reason I'm expecting the breach of the overnight high on this double top right here. So that just gives you an idea that the NASDAQ movement is being supported by aggressor activity, and I expect that to continue. So looking at the NASDAQ again, look at it. The S&P is kind of stuck in a balanced overnight profile. The NASDAQ actually breached its low, so it was weaker on Friday than the S&P was, and then today it's making up for it with a multi-distribution profile here. Multi-distribution profile with the point of control down below with DGPs, and so we have a separation between overnight value and current prices. The expectation for the NASDAQ is that it is likely to just clear out late buyers, and then very much likely to bring it back in towards the 25,000 or so, 25,100, back into the prior range. I do not expect the NASDAQ to open and run today. We're opening in a slight gap. Okay? Does that all make sense to you all? Hopefully you've picked something up today and can carry it forward, or it gives you a comparison to what plans you had or you expected for today, and then you can base your evaluation on that. Okay? Good luck today, and I'll catch you tomorrow morning. Take care.